Eternal eternity. I propagate this truth to be established as the awesome evidence that all humans are in fact awesome and created totally equal by our awesome Creator. This particular informative video is hereby created to enlighten my fellow human on common misconceptions about our human history. The misconceptions actually stem from his story, in which history is reported by the surviving victor. Of course, all sides have a tale, but the less beneficial party often lacks the power to propagate their truth. We all have an individual view of each life obstacle that takes place during our existence. Let's talk awesome human history. Our awesome human race originates on our planet exactly where our geographic circumference receives the most optimal heating from our life source, the sun. This is not the discussion where I speak of our pre-origin, because it's extremely probable that we were brought here by our universal progenitors. People, we are in an eternity. For some people, me even mentioning the origin of humanity and not including Adam and Eve places them in an uncomfortable place mentally, because their religion has taught them to listen to nothing but that religion. This is also a sad situation when one human belief creates a consensus amongst other humans that will not allow their intelligence to grow. You can't progress without learning. And if you think our Creator doesn't want you to progress and grow strong in this eternity, I guess I'll just continue to propagate truth and righteousness while I'm earthly and until all of our awesome human family is on board. We started in a place whose ancient name was Alkaboulon, now called Africa. The origin of this name rests on a few theories that will be discussed in another video. Alkaboulon is where the sun supports the largest collective landmass, even at the time of Pangea. Alkaboulon is where life can thrive via complex ecosystems in which humans can produce sustenance via crops and shelter via natural resources. The first humans to inhabit this planet were scientifically proven to be of extremely dark pigment, or as they would say today, black. This fact of our human nature is often obscured for a few different reasons, although I will give credit to organizations like National Geographic, who refuse to propagate anything but facts. I love you for that, Nat Geo. Before we delve off into the many reasons, let's continue with our origin, but I'll leave you with one reason to think about. During the period of slavery, our United States government, which I so love, but will be the first to admit that we haven't always and probably still don't have totally honest practices. But I'll also defend and say we're striving for improvement, and our awesome nation has a clear record on continuous improvement on its behalf. In my country, white slave owners, white commoners, black slave owners, black commoners, and black slaves were all told that African slaves were 3/5 human. This became a general consensus. The side effects. What had to be also incorporated into all of those people's mentalities in order for such a belief to even have false ground? Well, history surely had to be altered. One of these alterations, the entirety of the old Roman Empire was now displayed as Germanic Caucasian, when in fact the Roman Empire did not turn Germanic Caucasian until circa 5th century AD. I would really like for my listeners to look up Alaric. He is regarded as the first Germanic Caucasian king. He stood up to those older Romans who were of dark pigment or black. The old Romans enslaved and abused many of the Germanic tribes, and this was wrong. The Germanic people of that era didn't possess anything superior as it pertains to the technology of the era. The old Roman Empire took advantage of the weak, and they paid for it with the loss of their empire, supplanted by the awesome tribes of Germania. The Germanic tribes also originate from Alkaboulon, but due to the climate variations and the complexity of our awesome human race, they're white. Their pigment is at minimal due to the prolonged exposure to cold weather and lack of sun. This happens to any living organism, by the way. The polar bear, Arctic fox, Arctic hare are all animals whose fur coat changed to clear after they migrated to colder temperatures. It's fucking beautiful and totally awesome. Back to the educational point. I will also speak on the atrocities committed by the old Roman Empire upon the Germanic tribes, but that will be a separate video. Also look up Boudica. I love her. She was totally kick-ass and was the first person recorded for the Germanic tribes to lead a true revolt against those damn Romans. The Iceni Queen is featured numerous times on my Pinterest page and my Instagram, of course. Three-fifths of a vote or a human is an excellent evidentiary point to so prove motive and intent of the changing of scientific facts about our human history. To say that a person is 3/5 of a human or 3/5 of a vote only allows and totally facilitates the condescending of another human, the equivalent of a pet. For this to be a plausible and cogent theory, history had to receive a makeover. It's been pretty much proven and documented the human origin and which way we decided to travel first. The obvious answer is to first explore the connected land before the risk of the unknown, the sea. As we continue to unearth new evidence, we continue to learn. There have been many theoretical revisions of our human origin over the past decades, but one fact remains and stands strong: the origin, that is, Alkaboulon. The arguments stem from the time of migration. It has now been discovered that humans migrated out of Africa earlier than previously thought. Regardless of our geographic origin, something that we all must comprehend is the melanin factor. Melanin isn't gained via incessant production of those that lack melanin or migration of our human race to a place with sun. It's lost but replaced with a different type of physical strength and attribute that allows our bodies to withstand powerful diseases and endure in extreme temperatures. It's all about evolution, people. And our human race producing the palest skin possible is a part of our evolution. If you think about it, it's full circle. In the womb, no one has pigmentation. This is how we all start off, as totally transparent and pale. Our awesome creator has allowed us to produce the entire rainbow of skin tones, actually initiating as pale in the womb and displaying the full extension on earth via the various beautiful skin tones. Let's delve into skin tone. The dominating fact about skin tone and origin is that it can't be eliminated. The evidence is still present today, from the continent of Africa to Greece to India to the Americas, traveling as far north as Canada and experiencing extremely cold temperatures. Human pigment will only turn as light as that of the skin tones one would see in northern India. Although ancient Asiatics were pretty dark, lighter Asians and Caucasians received their pale pigment from prolonged exposure to cold temperatures and the lack of direct sunlight. In cold temperatures, we humans are prohibited from various activities that the sun allows. Producing crops for sustenance is halted. Spending time in the sun to receive the awesome energy the sun exudes is stunted because who the fuck wants to freeze to death? A log cabin may not be what is best in extreme cold. Cave dwelling may be much more auspicious and appeasing. Humans migrated east out of Alkaboulon, populating and leaving human existence along the borders of and within the nations of present-day Greece, Turkey, India, Alaska, Canada, all the way down to the lower tip of South America. The dark pigment isn't lost in Italy or at the latitudes of any of the nations I just named. Photos taken of encounters with Eskimos of the Alaskan region even display darker pigmented people. While on this subject, I also feel it's important to talk about facial structure as it pertains to the bust of historic Roman figures and historic Greek figures. While those people who are darkly pigmented dominate the facial structure of thick lips and a round nose, while lighter pigmented humans dominate the features of pointed noses and thinner lips, this isn't a general rule. Dark pigmented people from different regions of the globe possess every facial structure that exists. There are also pale complected people with round noses and thick lips. Those features also have to do with the climate. The best analogy to explain this is that of the polar bear. When the brown bear migrated to the Arctic, probably traveling with humans, her fur wasn't the only thing that changed. The bone structure also evolved to deal with the cold. The snout of the polar bear grew longer as an evolutionary trait to better assist with hunting amongst other survival skills. This same evolution happens with humans or any living organism as it pertains to their superficial traits and acclimation to their environment. So when there's arguments or falsities produced displaying the ancient Greeks as humans whose skin tone had reached pale pigment, or even those humans of the old Roman Empire being displayed falsely with pale pigmentation. There are scientific facts that largely discredit that. There are a few factors that discredit the pale pigmentation factor, but I'd like to touch on one in detail: the education factor. The Germanic Caucasian tribes, which is the sub-origin of the Germanic Caucasian people, possessed an education that was totally inferior to that of the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans. Africans, Romans, and Greeks understood that the earth was a sphere as early as the 6th century BC. The Germanic tribes that inhabited Europe during the time of Columbus were fairly new to oceanic travel. In fact, the earliest known vessels for sea being built by Germanic Caucasian people initiates around the 8th century AD by that of the Vikings. I don't bring these facts into light to condescend. The equality of skin tone couldn't be more so proven than by the awesome truths of history. The ostensible laws of succession from one point of origin are all very transparent. The only confusion lies within purposeful human deception. And one of the main reasons for this deception was to ensure that the slaves brought over from Africa kept the mentality of a slave. White supremacy is another ostensible factor as it pertains to causation. As the Anglos, Saxons, Franks, Goths, Vandals, and many other Germanic tribes began to flood the old Roman Empire in the 5th century AD, they did in fact mingle with its inhabitants. As they did this, they also spread a certain immunity to powerful human diseases. Let me explain. When humans settled the area of ancient Germania and northwards of lands like Scandinavia or Norway, their bodies underwent awesome genetic changes. As one attribute became mitigated in feature, others gained strength in feature. The Germanic Caucasian people suffered through extremely cold temperatures, extreme poverty, and mitigated exposure to the sun in order to give the rest of our human race the immunities that we possess today. There were various plagues that also happened and shaped our world over the early 80 centuries that contributed to the fall of all but the Germanic tribes. Our human bodies were evolving. Those who survived these plagues were now immune. That is, until the next wave, perhaps. This period was a shedding of the earth to phase out the old and prepare for the new way. It wasn't like Alaric just forcibly took over the old Roman Empire. There's recorded battles, of course, but please understand that the old Roman Empire was badly diminished. As early as 165 AD, epidemics such as the Antonine Plague began to weaken the old Roman Empire. Here's the effect and damning proof. If we travel in time to almost 1,000 years later in the 15th century, when people from the Eastern Hemisphere began to re-establish contact with those on the Western Hemisphere, 90% of the native people on the Western Hemisphere were wiped out by sickness because their immune systems weren't as strong as the whites, blacks, Asians, or Indians on the Eastern Hemisphere who had all underwent the plagues and had established immunities to heavy sicknesses. So yes, we owe our current fortified health status to those Germanic Caucasian tribes who were subjected to extreme conditions, while the rest of the human race lived in a much more auspicious status quo. Thank you, my awesome pale brothers and sisters, for the awesome immunities endowed. The technology of ancient Alkaboulon, or Old Rome, or the ancient Greeks, or the ancient Chinese was absent from the Germanic European culture of circa 5th century AD. The purpose for this video was to destroy common misconceptions about history that hold us back as a human race because they lack verity. Even Hannibal, a known Carthaginian general from circa 183 to 181 BC, was displayed as a Germanic Caucasian man. This display has been totally discredited, but it goes to show the nature and presence of the deception that I speak of. The truth of the matter is that while some may accuse whites of being initiators of a racial supremacy campaign, I will quickly point out that it was the old Roman Empire who were of dark pigment, who enslaved and mistreated the weaker Germanic Caucasian tribes of the era first. The Germanics endured, became strong, learned the ways of their oppressors, and took control. I always love the underdog. I am an underdog, both as an individual in our awesome human race and as identified as a black man in my country, America, who must face challenges in a daily fight for equality. The circumference is very real and is really all that exists. Everything is made of circles, from the neutrino, the celestial circumference bodies that make up our universe, to the spiral circumferential galaxies that hold them. Whatever is sent out by any one individual, or anything for that matter, has no other option but to return to its point of origin because we are in a circumferential existence. Incessantly seek knowledge and incessantly find new ways and new things to love. Fear is your only enemy.